Now it's time to listen to our panelists, their opinion and their critique of the book. And I invite, first of all, Mr. Jacob Bushi to share. Jacob Bushi, please.
Thank you, everyone. I would first like to recount how I met Dr. Abdullah when he was at the CSM CRI. That's the correct acronym. Okay. When we met first. No, it's an important point because this was around the time when he was a scientist over there, and I'm a journalist who's always looking for stories and asking him about this and that. But this was also the time when the Ministry of Water Resources had this very, among the many things that they were doing, one of the things that they were investigating was the origins of the Saraswati River. And this was all the heydays of the first installment of this of the NDA government. So this was, of course, the intent of that particular investigation that time was purely in in glorifying the myth of India and proving that this particular the existence of this river validated our ancient texts. But what had struck me then was the fact that they had completely ignored the climate aspect of what had led to the slow drying of the Saraswati River in the first place. And here was this river that symbolized how over time civilizations can completely move across geographies, across continents, purely and completely alter ways of living and ways of life. So it is in this context that when we talk about climate chaos, or of course as Dr. Abdullah has very eloquently articulated in his book, that we normalize it in with the term climate change as if it is a purely natural and geological atmospheric geological formula. But actually this is something that is triggered almost entirely by human intervention into climate systems. It comes from our arrogance that the human mind is, of course, with all its creativity and all its powers of reasoning and ability to harness the laws that govern nature, can be so bold itself as to control it and and mutate it in ways that the human mind, that human beings think will always be for their for their benefit. But one of the points that I would like to dwell upon a little bit is the idea of science and reason itself. Yes, in this book we are we discuss quite extensively how powerful countries, particularly the United States, has a overwhelming dominance over technology and consequently capital. But where does this technological dominance have its origins? Technology has always been, a part of human nature. I mean, to accommodate, it has been in two ways. I mean, human beings accommodate themselves to nature, or human beings try to control nature. Controlling nature is what technology is all about. But it is since, I mean, if to put it in a very European context, it is since the Enlightenment, or since the 17th or 18th century, that we came upon these ideas of reason, as if that there were European scientists who basically argued and articulated that there are laws that govern the functioning of the universe, and if only we just understood these laws, whether it was written in the language of mathematics and whether it could be reproduced inside labs through artificial experiments, we would be able to dictate the course or course of nature in ways that can benefit us. Very positive, very enlightening. But let us look at also what has happened after that. When this logic of science and reason has been applied in a way, it has been applied in ways that is liberating to people. It has been applied in ways that sets them free. But when it is being captured by power, when it is being captured by vested interests, the same science that promotes reason can also be perverted in ways that were unimaginable even to the so-called savage pre-scientific ancestors of ours. I mean, let us look at, for example, anybody who's studied botany, in some way or other, Carl Linnaeus. I mean, we commemorate him whenever we are studying plants and their classification, and we use the two-named, nominal system to identify every species on Earth. It is also not. It is kind of buried in the footnotes of scientific history that Carl Linnaeus was also the first person who, in his enthusiasm to classify plants, animals, also classified races of people. He was the first person who scientifically came up with this perverted logic that the Europeans or the whites are the dominant superior races, whereas black African people are inferior. And he even went so bold as to claim that these were actually not yet anywhere near the levels of human. Come down to a few more decades after that. We all know Darwin, but what about his nephew, Francis Galton? I mean, he was he was one of the brightest stars of the European intellectual tradition. But Francis Galton, who's now revered as the father of biostatistics, the person who understands and analyzes, all the statistics-based understandings that we have incorporated into us. He was a person who actually initiated the use of statistics to study racial differences. This was not any innocent, pure investigation. He was a person who used the most ultra-scientific methods of his time, using those craniometers and, basically which are those instruments that are used to measure the diameter of skulls. And in complete contrivance or contradiction of the original scientific spirit, where you do measurements to find out something new, he was a person who wanted to use science to confirm his own biases. So he made all these measurements and he invented several branches of statistics to basically argue, again, the same thing as Linnaeus has argued, which is that, the European race is more evolved, is more refined, and is more developed, and therefore, all of this, of course, was in the larger project of imperialism, basically giving a to come up with a scientific basis to justify rule, or to how to dominate, how one species, one set of people can dominate over the others. And fair to say, this is all absolute, all of these science and these research papers were the foundational philosophies of these fields. Of course, there has been this attitude since that, hey, these are people, let us leave out whatever, let us not throw out the babies with the bathwater, so to say. Let us extract the science out of, and keep aside their racial proclivities, which is, I guess, a tenable argument. But I would argue that it is this thinking that still pervades much of what we do in the name of scientific improvement and scientific, applying technology to what some people would say improving the lives and livelihoods of people. looking at the climate debate is a sterling example of this. I have covered a couple of COP conferences in various countries, where the essential practice is that all of these countries come and we have about 10 days of deliberations and ministerial meetings where one set of countries is trying to cajole the other set of countries into accepting emission cuts and all of those things, and how some countries resist it. Now, what is the mode of resistance, let's say, a country like India has? It is an unalloyed fact that India is the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases. Ultimately, as far as nature is concerned, it is only the net amount of carbon that really matters. If, of course, you believe or you accept that the remaining science is true, that is, an accumulation of carbon dioxide is what drives greenhouse gas-based heating. But as far as a government is concerned, we have somehow taken the argument of equity and justice, because as several of you who follow the debates would probably know, that India's argument is that yes, we are a developing country and we must have the right to use the same amount of fossil fuels that made other countries develop. But because of a population, we are very low on per capita terms, which is which is an argument which we cannot really debate against, because it comes under the logic of justice, fairness, and equity. So India actually articulates that it is fair and just on its part, using this concept of just dividing the number of the quantity of carbon dioxide by its population, which logically would is very large. So the idea is that we use techniques of science, techniques of statistics to make arguments that ultimately clash against what science itself says regarding concepts like the greenhouse gas and how our environmental future itself is at peril. So, in closing, I would just like to end by saying that the idea of science as a liberating force is not true in its entirety. Somehow it is. I guess this would be a discussion we could take in a different forum. I've always been curious about the fact that is violence something that is inherent to human nature. I mean, people have studied the evolutionary societies such as chimpanzees and bonobos, our closest primate ancestors, and ethologists have come out with very surprising findings about ape behaviors and the tendency of violence that even characterizes some of our closest primates. So I've always been curious, is this something that is inherent somehow to our species, that we formulate divisions and we try to create groups and we try to create us versus them situations, and even science per se is considered science when we are taught to, if you want to observe the results of a particular force or if you want to observe cause and effect, you have to separate the rest of the world from that particular experiment that you are having. And that is what a valid experiment usually is, and is what which gets reported in journals. So the idea of separation, the idea of parting things apart, is also a kind of violence. I would argue in a way, and I think it is a matter that we should dwell upon more seriously and ask whether these forces and these pulls and pressures are so inherent to us that they in some way define what it is to be human. Thank you.